What's going on, sports fans? And welcome to a brand new show that we've brought in here to Prep Insider. My name is Christian Pedersen. This is Ron Marquez, the events operations coordinator for CIF. Just the Don Mafioso doing everything in the background. And we are going to be every week helping really round out the coverage here in San Diego. We're going to talk about tennis, water polo, field hockey, cross country, administrative stuff if need be. We're going to talk about a little bit of everything. I know that I am super excited about this. I know that you are a little bit bored of me talking at you so much, but it's really nice to have you on, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having us and trying to get us out there and get us a little more exposure.
Well, hey, this is going to be really fun because you always see me blathering on about football and some of those bigger sports, but on this page we have some of actually the biggest stories in San Diego to talk about every single week. I say we just skip the rest of the intro and we go right to the good stuff because the first one here we have is the tennis scene is blowing up. There was a little bit of history that happened this week in terms of upset. Is it safe to call that an upset?
A little bit. You got Torrey Pines kind of looking behind over their shoulder, and you got San Diego kind of took them by surprise, beat them in a tiebreak 9-9 last week, and you got Canyon Crest kind of steamrolling some competition too, so it's going to be interesting. Their streak, Torrey Pines' streak of the 28 or 29 straight titles might be in a little bit of jeopardy this year.
So put this kind of into perspective, and I think that's something that we're going to need to do with some of these sports for the uneducated, uninitiated fan of these. San Diego, Torrey, historical disparity, pretty big. San Diego, newer program. Torrey, the more classical program. Is this everything that you'd ever want in that kind of a storyline?
It's a good bookmark, to put it that way. San Diego, I have to say, they're a good program in their own right. They're right up there. They've been Division I. They were Division I finalists last year for girls, so they're a good program. But Torrey, I mean, just again, it's hard to measure up. 20, like I said, 29 pushing 3 decades of straight titles. A lot of history there, and a lot of teams have been wanting it, and they've been wondering when is going to be their time. So this year might be a year for a team like San Diego or Canyon Crest or Rancho Bernardo to kind of catch up and make that, put a change in that open division champion.
You mentioned Canyon Crest when we were getting started. Talk about the season the Ravens are having a little bit and just how significant it is to see some of these newer schools. Canyon Crest is still relatively new in the spectrum of everything, getting to success so quickly.
Yeah, they're loaded this year. Just a lot of influx of talent. They were good last year too, but this year they've got a good team, new coach. So a lot of new refreshing things about that program, and with everybody healthy, and that's the key. If everybody's healthy, because the tennis season's a long season, and if they go in the playoffs with a full load of players, they're going to be hard to beat.
Now, tennis is a sport where you have both the team aspect of it and the individual aspect of it. So let's focus on, let's highlight a specific player, Juanita Waldy from Helix. You mentioned that she's having an amazing season so far. Tell us a little bit about what she's been accomplishing.
Well, last year's a freshman, made the semifinals of CIF, got there, and just made a splash last year, and hoping to improve on that this year, playing for Helix and really just making some noise out in the East County.
Also out in the East County, sort of out in the East Bay. They had East in the name, but they're in the South Bay. East Lake is another team that really represents strongly for a certain part of this community.
Yep. They're a perennial power down in the South Bay and make the Open every year, in both boys and girls. So they always seem to make some noise, and they're dangerous when it comes to the playoffs. Nobody really gets to see them because they don't usually come north of the 8 a lot. So there are a lot of teams they wonder, what do they look like, who they played, but they usually say make some noise and have some good players on that team too. So they're always one to watch. Now,
is tennis a sport where you can sort of project out how a team is doing based off the first couple of matches, or is it really you wait to that very end to see how they're playing the week or two before playoffs is going to be how they're playing in playoffs?
Yeah, you kind of look at the last 2 weeks of the season and look at those league matchups and see how they finish matches and kind of look at the scores. Are they close? Are they blowing out matches, or are they struggling? And that kind of gives you a good indicator of how they are into the season, just because with playoffs you don't know, because there's transfers would sit out, so they don't play till later in the season. Injuries if they get healthy later in the season. So last 2 or 3 weeks of the season is usually a good indicator of how the playoffs are going to look.
So we have a little bit of time until we still get to those last 2 or 3 weeks of the season. But my goodness, as we look at league starting to get going in the next couple of weeks, starting right about now, it is really amazing to see that top end is just absolutely packed with talent. Another sport right now that is absolutely packed with talent is the guys' water polo scene. Last couple of weeks, they play so many tournaments, so many cross sections, so many, these are coming down from Orange County. We're going up there, that it's sometimes hard to really know where we stand right off the bat. But we're now at the beginnings of league, and I know that some of these schools still have these like insanely backloaded schedules where you'll get Vista still has Noto, Bishops, La Jolla, Cathedral all in a 5-day span type of thing. But as of right now, we have a couple of big matchups already this week to talk about. Bishops and Vista, that's going down today.
Yep.
What are you looking forward to in that matchup?
That's a good indicator again for the playoffs. Just kind of a preseason match, well, not a preseason, but a regular season matchup going into CIF, kind of a preview to see what the playoffs are going to look like. So it'd be, again, interesting to see how this initial matchup goes and how to look forward to the rest of the season.
Cathedral at Lutheran, a cross-section matchup, but Cathedral is a school that has had some coaching changes in the last couple of years and is building up something that always feels like they could at any second become Open Division champions.
Yeah, definitely. They got a great program down there, and you never know with the talent they have. You never know who's going to step up, and I know they got a couple good seniors up there leading that team, and they always play a tough schedule. They've historically, regardless of the coach, they've always played a tough schedule, and hosting teams like Lutheran or Mater Dei from up north and Harvard Westlake, they always seem to be right up there with the top teams in the southern section to kind of prepare them for the playoffs down here.
Now, we saw the first state playoffs last year, which did not necessarily go San Diego's way, but sort of gave us that kind of a barometer, like you mentioned. So in football, it's almost impossible to have Helix play the entire the entire Trinity League or something like that to get a real barometer. But in water polo, you can actually sort of say, hey, going into these state playoffs, we've matched up with this team and that team and all these other teams. So to me, it feels like water polo has this really interesting, like almost statewide dynamic where you really do know where you stand at the end of a season.
Yeah, I mean, take a look at, give volleyball, kind of use them as an example, starting back with them. Southern Cal or San Diego was kind of the second rate to LA, Southern section for a little while, but look where we stand now. I mean, the last 5 or 6 years, we've had state champions up and down the divisions, and I think water polo for us is going to follow the same model because they travel up to Orange County, up to LA, Santa Barbara. I think in a couple of years you'll start seeing section or regional champions from San Diego too.
I mean, it certainly is interesting, and it's just amazing in general when you get to talk about a San Diego team on that level competing with some of the best, because we do have kids committed to everything from Princeton to Stanford to UCLA to San Diego or to UCSD, all of these different schools where they're playing at that next level. A couple of other matchups that we want to highlight happening on Thursday of this week is Mater Dei Hilltop. That is a league matchup down there in the South Bay. For as much as we talk about the top tier, there's something interesting that's always happening down in Division II, where we see with Steel Canyon last year winning that first one ever in school history. The way that CIF has set up these new divisions in the last couple of years, somebody is always making school history, and these are a pair of teams that could be on that verge this season.
No, definitely. That's the great thing about the competitive divisions now. It gives everybody a fighting chance. You just got to keep working hard, and whatever division you're in, you got a shot. So this is a good way. These league matchups. And that way leagues are being built on competitive divisions as well. So you are going to start seeing competitive league games, which can mirror the playoffs later on too.
A team that I want to finish off with is Poway. They are playing at Mount Carmel. This one is a league matchup that's a fun rivalry historically between these schools, but also kind of interesting because Poway, the last couple of years, has been a newcomer on that Open Division bubble. Yep. They've been in that 6, that 8. That last year, just based off the math for a little while, they were the number 1 team in the county, just based off of their record, and they were so hot. So Poway, Mount Carmel, not just a rivalry, but a chance for Poway to continue to prove their resume.
Exactly. And vice versa, it's the same thing for Mount Carmel. Chance for them to prove themselves too.
I like that thought. The underdog, the upset.
Yeah, exactly. So there are a lot of little undertones for this one to prove for Poway in the Open Division, Mount Carmel to prove they belong in there too with their aquatics program. So a lot of good things can happen from that.
So let's shift now. We'll move that graphic down to field hockey. They are not yet quite in league play, but
still non-league, yeah.
They're still non-league, but that doesn't mean a lack of big matchups. Ultimately, yes, everybody is still chasing Sarah, and there could be a whole 30 for 30 done on the domination that Coach Berger has put together there. I think that for as much as some coaches want to talk about their dominance, she probably just has a Ziploc bag of Open Division championship rings that she could bust out. But we have a couple of huge matchups to get to this week. Scripps Torrey. This feels like if I said to you this was the semifinal of a playoff matchup, you'd be like, oh, I totally believe that.
Yeah, you got Torrey's perennial power in a lot of their sports, and Scripps is another one right there, right along. They've been chasing Sarah right there on the heels and played them in the finals for field hockey a few years. So this is always a good matchup, two good schools.
So with a matchup this big in the non-league early parts of the season, sort of the same question I asked you about tennis. Is this a legitimate barometer for teams' talent, or is this still somewhere where, regardless of this game, they could still go up or down in 100 different directions?
A little bit of both. Again, it's a good barometer. I mean, when I was coaching in tennis too, I'd always backload my preseason with some of the toughest schools in the county to see going into a regular season. This is how we are. This is what we need to work on, and get ready for the playoffs. So this is a good way for them to match up. So this is where we are right now for the next month and a half. What do we need to work on to get ready for the playoffs? So it's a good way for them to kind of gauge where they are.
Another team that's got a big test this week is Granite Hills. They'll be playing at Valley Center. That's just a tough road game, no matter who you are, in what sport. But that's an especially interesting one because Granite is a team that every win right now could potentially set them up in get a home game in the playoffs type situation.
Exactly. And that's one thing with the competitive playoff system too. You got to play well in every game. You got to look where you're at, but you got to win every game for your record, and that way you can place well for the playoffs. So that's something every team, no matter what the sport, you got to look at. You got to make sure you do your best and win those games the best you can too, to set yourself up for success.
Well, let me ask you a question, kind of just dovetailing off of that, because sometimes when you look at these results, you go, "Oh, that's a brutal." Like they beat them by 8, they beat them by 10, but that's not always necessarily a reflection of distaste for a team or of talent so much as it sometimes is coaches being like, we need this to be a quality win to set up. So sort of, maybe take 20 seconds and educate people about how it isn't just necessarily disrespect, or it isn't something where you're like, oh, I'm running up the score because we can, but it's you are a quality opponent, and we just need these extra couple goals to help us reflect the quality of this win.
Yeah, well, with these matchups too, fortunately, it doesn't matter what score. There's no points involved like soccer or things like that too. But it's the win. So whether and when I talk about going back to tennis because I was coach for 20 years, it didn't matter if we won 18-0 or 10-8 or 9-9 for that fact. It's just getting that win, and a win in the schedule for your power ranking is a win regardless of the score. So I think as a coach, you want to be competitive. You want your team to succeed, but also in the big picture, where does that fit? Teams that you're used to seeing in the playoffs, you want to make sure you get those wins because later on, that may factor into your seeding. If you have a head-to-head win against that team, you get to bump up in those seedings, and vice versa. If you don't, you move down. So as a coach, you got to pay attention to these things, but in that moment, you want your team to just play as well as possible and then learn from that too. I mean, one thing as being a coach, kind of personal note, I didn't mind losing because it gave my goal for the team for later on. If we had to play them in the playoffs again, they come back a little hungrier. So who knows? Incentive-wise, you can look at it that way too.
I have a feeling that you were, and always will be a much more mature and well-perspected coach than I would have ever been, because I would not have been able to handle a early season loss, even to the toughest of opponents. I would have taken it too.
It doesn't mean I like doing that. I just put it in perspective that when it happened, you spin it that way too. So I mean, there's ways you got to look at it too.
Fair enough. I'd enjoy being in your locker room. The last sport we got is cross country. Now, this is really exciting for me because this is the first time I've ever been able, as Prep Insider, to talk about cross country. The way that this works early on in the season is, it seems like every weekend you get all the teams together, or a fairly large amount of them in one sitting to sort of hash out the results there, instead of we do a Monday meet with this school and then a Thursday meet with that school. So this weekend, though, the Mount Carmel invite. Now, this is a big one.
Yeah, this is a big one. You got Dennis McClanahan, who's kind of the cross-country godfather, runs this event. And so it's a good way. Up these next few weekends will be big meets where all these teams from all over San Diego can compete, and it's a good way for all these runners to see how they match up. It's a good CIF preseason matchup for everybody to see what's around the county, what do I got to look for, and it's a good way. And this is a big one because Mount Carmel is a good meet to be in. So it's good for these individuals to run, and teams to know how they space out when they get to CIF. So you got this one, you had Rancho Bernardo last weekend, you've got a couple more coming up the next couple weekends before league starts in October. So this is a good one, probably a first indicator for how this cross-country season is going to pan out.
So just sort of give us the breakdown of how do you measure success? How do you measure yourself as a team in such a group setting?
Cross country, it's tough. I mean, I'm just from being at different meets and understanding the last few years is it's not about just the one person. You can have the fast runner, but it's about your 2 through 5 or 6. You got to make sure they all finish relatively close together towards the front. So your 1 could really set the pace, but you want to make sure 2 through 6 are right there behind them somewhere. And if your 1 isn't the 1, that's fine. If they're in the top 5, then your next few are in the top 20. That's a good thing for a team, and these are good ways for these teams to practice that too. And it kind of not only shows who the top runners are, but as teams, who your 5, 6 are, who they are, and how they need to fit in this whole team component so that team can win a championship.
How many runners this weekend, just to give people, because these are massive events. These are.
Couldn't tell you. I mean, it would rival what CIF does for the championships. I mean, you're probably looking at these meets are 8 to 10, 12 schools at least.
Exactly.
So, with 6 or 7 running per, so you're close to 100 people. Yeah,
so that's where this is actually a really impressive feat to finish where you want to as a team, because like you said, there's the physics of it all to be racing with that many people and to be able to know where you're at and pacing and all that kind of stuff. It always blows my mind how there is actually a lot of math and a lot of planning that goes into understanding how you're doing as a team in a cross-country sport like that. And it's not just track where it's run fast for 100 meters and then lean forward a little bit and hope Coy Ellis doesn't beat you.
2 or 3 miles at least, and these kids are really pushing in the weather. Fortunately, it's starting to cool down a little bit, but the weather's been tough and these courses are tough, so these kids are tested really early. So
that wraps up for the individual sports that we got. Every week we'll be coming at you guys with some new updates. Definitely, if you have anything school-related wise, the individual stories, hit us up. Where can they get in contact with you?
Just here at CIF. Contact the office. You got our emails. Mine's roncifsds@gmail.com. You can email me with any questions. Call our office here. Just visit our website. We try to keep that up to date with information.
What's the website so they can find all the results?
It's CIFSDS.org.
Now, there is something I will say as a sub-note about the website is it is driven partially by team and coaches putting in the results.
Yes.
So you had a little bit of something you wanted to address about that.
Yeah, just asking coaches administratively, because a lot of you are power ranked. You got to make sure those scores are put into home campus as soon as you can, because when we do release the power rankings, it's based on everything that's entered. So it's up to the schools to enter information correctly. Just give them a heads up. Deadline is September 22nd for all schools to have their schedules posted. If not, you're going to get a call from our office and make sure those are done.
Final thing we got going on this week is you have the CIF Symposium that's going on Thursday. You want to tell people a little bit about what that's going to be?
Yeah, that's kind of our annual meeting for our member schools. So last year we had about 300. This year we're going to be pushing about 350 in attendance. Great event. I think it's a great way for schools to kind of get together and network and understand what we're looking for CIF, how we can support all our schools, and then what we do are the championships. So it's a lot of behind the scenes stuff for our schools that we got to handle. I'll be talking with finance techs and ADs and making sure how to make sure we pay them correctly and they pay their entry fees correctly. A lot of good behind the scenes stuff that schools need to do so our students can play and make sure everything, the championships are run really well. So it's a good informational event, and all the schools, we got them coming from Imperial Valley, South Bay, all over. So it'll be at the stadium this year. So a bigger venue this year, and like I said, it should be a good event. And Coach Jerry was talking about, our commissioner was talking about this year being addressing mental health in our students, which is real important. So it'll be a good topic for our schools to hear. Well,
that's a beautiful segue into the closing note that I wanted to hit is that, like he mentioned, Commissioner Schneep has been kind enough to share a couple of sit-downs with me, and we have those up on our YouTube. They're up on your website. We have a couple more that we haven't gotten out yet, but really take the time to watch these, because for as much as people just see this name on banners and on the little celebrate the plaques, and I didn't win any of them, so I don't know exactly what to call the patches. Not bitter about that at all, but
we'll get you a patch.
But there's so much activism. There's so much perspective of trying to foster young adults, young men and women here that people need to really take in an appreciation of. So watch some of my sit-downs with the commissioner, and I'm sure we'll have you and Labetta and everybody in this office has something to commit, to contribute to this, because there is a group of people here that are working to take care of everybody in this section.
Yeah, no, that's what we're here for. We're here to support our schools and make sure they have what they need, and make sure everybody kind of plays on the same field. So.
Well, that'll end it for week 1 of our broadcasts here in the office. Thank you very much for taking a couple minutes out of your busy day. I'm glad that this has been a tango back and forth for a couple years to get this to finally happen. And I'm excited that it is all lined up. We will be back next week with another recap and roundup of all that. Until then, sports fans, we'll see you at a game.